Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Today is October 24th, 2021. Welcome to Wall Street to Bay Street Sunday Chai with Sharia Portfolio Canada. My name is Nadeem.
And my name is Sajjad.
And my name is Shamil. Get your chai ready and let's get into the swing of things. So we got some pretty big news this week. There was a new Bitcoin ETF released. So Nadeem, let's start off by talking about the Sharia aspect of Bitcoin.
Sure. As far as Bitcoin being Sharia compliant, right now there's really no consensus. There are some scholars who say that it is compliant, some scholars who say no, it's not. And there are some scholars who are kind of on the fence saying it's too early and to be determined almost, right? Ultimately, Allah knows best. And, we encourage everybody to do their due diligence and, try to get the various opinions and maybe speak to your local scholar to try to get some guidance. But as of right now, there is no real consensus on the Sharia compliance of it. But there are obviously strong arguments on both sides as far as it is compliant or it's not compliant. So the answer to that really is that it's still to be determined as far as a consensus goes.
What about the new ETF? Can you give us a summary of it?
Sure. So this it's called the ProShares Bitcoin Strategy ETF, and the ticker is BITO. It trades on the New York Stock Exchange. Now, ProShare offers a variety. It actually is one of the largest lineup of ETFs. In the US, they have something like over 67 billion in assets. Now, this is the first US linked Bitcoin ETF. In Canada, we did have a couple of providers in Canada that did also launch a Bitcoin ETF earlier this year. But this one was the first in the US. From a Sharia compliance standpoint, specific to the one that was recently launched in the US, even if, for example, you take the opinion that Bitcoin is, say, Sharia compliant, right? This ETF is not, and for the simple reason that the fund itself invests into Bitcoin futures and not the coins themselves. So, that's the main difference, is that if you, for example, took the opinion that Bitcoin is Sharia compliant and I want to invest into it, this current ETF would not be Sharia compliant. And since futures contracts, basically they're a leveraged derivative product, it does not make it Sharia compliant.
Could you maybe also talk about why this was such a big deal in the news and also in the crypto world?
Sure. There's a few things. Like, firstly, it's the first, like I mentioned, it's the first US Bitcoin ETF. Now, you almost have to kind of compare this to Canada, and you're like, wait a sec, we launched a couple of these in Canada. Why is this such a big news? Well, the fact of the matter is the US is 10 times more bigger than Canada in terms of population and every other metric you can think out there. This means it's kind of like saying, the appetizer and the main course. So this really means, the US launch really means that it gives access to US retail and even some institutional investors. So, for example, if you were in the US and you had a retirement account and wanted to own Bitcoin, previously you couldn't just buy coins in your IRA or any registered accounts. But now you can actually do that at a relatively low cost, right? Secondly, it also may indicate like a path to mainstream acceptance. The fact that there is a product out there such as an ETF, which ETFs are obviously very popular. Currently right now, cryptocurrency only makes up about 1% of the total net worth in US households. And an ETF helps open that channel, basically. And we're already starting to see some institutions and pension funds investing into crypto, such as there's a big insurance company, Mass Mutual. They've come out and said that they bought some Bitcoin. And this week also a Houston fireman pension fund bought about $25 million worth of Bitcoin.
What impact does this ETF have on the price of Bitcoin, short term and long term?
So, I mean, firstly, because of the structure of the contract, it should track the price and performance of Bitcoin relatively well. Short term, prior to the launch of the ETF, Bitcoin was rallying back to its previous highs that we saw earlier this year. And coincidentally, once the ETF was launched, Bitcoin did break above that high. It was trading above 66,000 US before pulling back on Friday. But as far as impact, I think this is like a chicken or an egg argument. So there's no real answer to the short-term implications. Longer term, ultimately, the fundamentals of Bitcoin will dictate where it goes. So the ETF simply becomes a vehicle for that. Also, keep in mind that the ETF are not only bought, which is obviously a bullish stance, but the ETFs can also be short sold, which is a bearish stance, which also is not Sharia compliant. There's no short selling, when it comes to Sharia compliant investing. But what I'm really trying to get at is that the ETF will allow investors to take both sides of the bull bear debate on Bitcoin.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for your insight on that, Nadeem. It's going to be really cool to see how Bitcoin's ETF price goes going forward. And that's all the information we have today. So once again, thank you so much for joining us. For myself, Nadeem, and Sajjad, we hope to see you next week with your chai. And if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments section below.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
Nadeem Mian, Portfolio Manager, registered as an advising representative, and Shamil Devji, Financial Advisor, registered as a dealing representative with Sharia Portfolio Canada Inc., a portfolio manager registered in the provinces of Ontario, British Columbia, and Alberta. Their opinions and statements expressed in this show are their personal opinions and do not necessarily reflect those of Sharia Portfolio. They are effective as of the date of this broadcast only and are subject to change. This discussion is for general information purposes only and is not investment advice.